Get started here. We're gathered here today to speak about time in Stratum, and this is a continuation of the series we've been doing on different intro topics for Stratum and how to use Stratum. And time is one of the key features that we have, and one of the things we do some cool stuff with. So wanted to talk a little bit just specifically about time today. So we'll get into that. Our agenda looks something like this. First of all, as you guys probably know, or if you've been on this series of things, my name's Frank. I've been around the product a long time, and I'll be taking you through a tour of both what we call time ranges, which is the default in Stratum, and what are time ranges and when should you use them. And then we'll talk about time series and what are they and when should you use them. And what I'm going to do is I'll hopefully have a little time for Q&A, but if not, I'm also able to hang out a little bit if anybody does want to ask some questions at the end of the session. Additionally, I'll have some information on how to get a hold of us. As a disclaimer for this entire session, I'm going to talk about columns predominantly. So when you're looking at measures, and when we talk about measures, if you remember, that means dollars, units, costs, whatever it may be, things like that, the numerical stuff you're looking at. I'm going to talk about them being in columns, but be aware these things can exist. You can move stuff to rows, and everything I say about columns will apply to rows as well if you've moved your measures over to rows. But I'm gonna focus on columns. That's far and away the most common thing we see from people, and it's the default in Stratum. So I'm going to go through that. So let's go ahead and get started. A couple of things. If you do have a question, everybody's muted right now, but if you do have a question, don't hesitate to use the chat. I've got that up on a separate window. Hopefully I'll see it, and I'll either try and cover the topic or get to it at some point. And so let's talk about time ranges and time ranges. So time ranges, what are they? So time ranges allow you to control time in each column of data. So in Stratum, you can go in for every column of information that you have, dollars, units, whatever it is, and you can control the time in that column. When we say control the time, we'll look at what that means as we go through things. But in essence, you can have year-to-date, month-to-date, and rolling all easily within the same view. You can see it for this year and last year, compare them, things like that. When you use time ranges, you'll see the sum of the range that you've specified. So they're easy to set up. So when we set up ranges, and what you'll see is there's amazingly enough, there's a from and a to that define the range. So a range has to have a beginning and an end. And they are the default in Stratum. So if you created a view from scratch, a lot of views that people just happen to create, they default to ranges because that is the default in Stratum. It's the most common thing that we see customers using. And they can span years. So where does this come up? Ranges spanning years really comes up the majority of the time when you talk about, say, a rolling 12. So I don't know if we were in February or what are we in? We're in April. You might go back 12 months, and obviously that's going to go back into 2020. So they can also be based on relative time. So it's important that you begin to understand in Stratum that you can use absolute time, which means I'm going to pick a very specific year, 2019, 2020, 2021. And I'm also going to pick a very specific month. I might pick January, February, March, or I might pick a specific week, weeks 1 through 52 or 53. And then you might also pick a specific day. You can do that. Now, relative time is more where you select, hey, the current year, last year, next year, things like that, so that as we move through time, you don't have to update your view. So, as time moves forward, which it inevitably will, or we're all in trouble, your view will automatically change as well. So you're using current month, current year, yesterday, things like that will consistently change for you. So we'll look at some of those things as well. So let's take a look at a view that uses ranges. So I'm just going to go into a view in Stratum here, and you'll see that I'm looking at a view that has a few columns on it. you can see here now, how do I know this is using time ranges? So pretty easily, if I look at the measures that are in this view up here at the top, you'll see that part of that is a piece that says July to September, which, by the way, as I've said many times on these sessions, in our demo, it's September. So let's pretend the current date is in September. But you'll see here it says July to September, and you'll get something that looks like this. At least automatically Stratum inserts these headers to let you know what the range of time that column specifically says. So if we look at this particular view, we can see that I've got a couple of columns here this year and last year, comparing them, and then a calculation based off that. I've got current month, and down at the end I've got year to date, and that starts in January. And again, you could have fiscal time, fiscal months, whatever. And most of the things I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about months, but please be aware that this could be months, it could be weeks, it could be days, it could be quarters, whatever your time range that you want to specify, and I'll show a little bit of that. But now the question comes up, how did these ranges get set? And there's a couple ways you can get to the range for a column. So if I go, and here's this one, is, remember we said this is 3 months. This is looking at 3 months. And what I'm going to find out, this is actually a rolling 3 months, and we'll know that. I know that because I'm familiar with the view, but you'll be able to see that. So one way I can get to this, in any Stratum header, you can just double click and you'll see now I've got the one that I just looked at, that column I just clicked on is here. And I can see down in the section down here, there's a section on time. And you can see here, I've got the time unit. So the time unit is what allows me to select months, days, years, whatever. I'm going to stick with months in my examples because I'm pretty sure everybody has months of some sort defined, but we'll stay focused on that. Now, then I have a from. So when I have a from piece, I can define that right here. And then obviously I have the to piece over here. So that's the range. When we talk about time ranges, you have a from and a to, and you have to set those. Now, how do I know that this is a rolling 3 months? Because if I look at this, it tells me that the time, the period is 2 months ago. So my from is, it's always going to be, as we talked about, relative base time. It's going to be 2 months ago, and it's going to go to the current month. So that's 2 months plus current is 3. So that's a rolling 3 months. As we move through time, it's going to change. I could update this. So let's say what I want to do conceptually here from a business point of view, I want to make this a rolling, I don't know, rolling 12. That would be a pretty common thing to do. So let's just kind of walk through how I could do rolling 12 and how I would set that. So the first thing in this particular view, since I'm comparing this year to last year, one of the options you have when you're in here, you can come in and you can highlight this, and I can highlight both of these. So if I highlight just one of them, you'll see this is the column for last year. So this, amazingly enough, the year changed to last year. So I set that to last year. The other column is current year. I want to change both of those. So one question we often get is, so why is this grayed out, the year? Because the two columns I've selected at the top have different years. So you can't change them. We don't know what you want to do that. But the period of time is the same in both of them. And what I said was I want to do rolling 12. So I'm going to drop this down. And here's where you can see here, January through December, that's that absolute time I talked about. So you can set it to just be any specific month or day or whatever it is you're looking at that you want. Just be aware that if you use these absolutes, it's not going to automatically change. And what's in this list is actually driven by what's in this time unit field here. So I'm looking at months up here. So this shows me months. And you'll see here when I scroll down, the relative time or base time here goes back 6 months and goes forward 5 months. That's because years, and I'm looking at months, have 12 entries. So I can have 12 relative entries. That said, are 12 based entries. And in my case, we decided to go back 6 months and out 5 months. Your mileage may vary on this, depending on, this is a configuration issue, but you can only have 12 of these. So in my example here, I said I wanted to go back rolling 12. So I obviously can't select any more than 6 months ago, so that's not enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset this column to current month. So now both columns are looking at current month. So the from and to is just the current month. Then I'm going to use this offset piece here. And this offset is how many periods of time based on what's in the time unit do you want to go forward or back? In this case, I'm going to say minus 11 because 11 plus one more for current is 12, and that'll give me rolling 12. So there you go, rolling 12 on the first two columns. The column associated with these, so these two columns are now rolling 12, and I can see that by the headers. This third column over here, which is a calculation based on those columns, changed automatically because it's based on those particular columns. So there you go. That's one way you can go ahead and change the time on any set of columns. And if we just look at a couple of these, let's go in and kind of see what the definition of some of these other columns. Now, another way to do this, and what I promoted in the earlier sessions we did, this 1, 2, 3 lets me always look at my measures up here. And this is one of the simplest ways to look at things. So I'm going to come in here. And what I like about this particular way to look at measures, it allows me to hide stuff. That's what the first column is, but I can also copy stuff. So if you set up a time range and you want to continue to add measures for that same time range, you can just copy this and then change the measure. Well, let's go into one of these down at the end. I said these were year to date. So we get this question once in a while. I'm going to edit this measure just to show you. And you can see here, I've got the time range stuff down at the bottom. And it goes for the current year. So it's always going to be current year, but I've used the absolute period of January. So my years and my imaginary business here starts in January. If yours started in June or whatever, because you have fiscal time, you could select that. But here, so I've anchored it on January, but then it's always going to keep changing over here in the in the to be the current month. So there you go. That'll give me that period of time it'll keep rolling for me to give me the year-to-date number, so I can do that. So there you go. That's kind of time ranges in general, and I'll come back around and talk a little bit about when I use time ranges versus time series. But first, let's talk about time series, because that's a different treatment of time in Stratum, and you can see how you can take advantage of that. So time series, what are they? So in Stratum, I talked about ranges where you can control time by individual columns. Now, this is the ability to control time across all the columns in series, like months, days, whatever it may be. Probably months and weeks are the most common things we see here. So I want to have my months going across the top of the page, and it's going to show me the sales for every one of those months, or the costs, or whatever it may be. So you have less control in terms of individual column control, but it's much simpler to see a series of consecutive time periods like months or weeks. And this is great if you're looking at a plan that goes out over time, you're comparing it to sales, something like that. Makes it really easy to do that. You don't have to, for those of you that were planner users, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But for those of you that were planner users, instead of when I want to have 12 months going across the page, having to define 12 separate columns, you can define one column, and that will be span across all 12 periods of time. The other thing you can do in time series is you can start at a higher level, say year or months, and you can drill down. So I can go from the year to the months to the days, because this takes advantage of time definitions or time dimensions in Stratum. You'll find information about time hierarchies, for example, in the help that will give you some ways you can see how we've linked different periods of time together. An important concept: ranges and series cannot be mixed. So if you're using time ranges, you get time ranges. If you're using time series, you use time series. A view cannot have both things in the same view. And this ranges or no ranges, which implies series, is set as a property in the measures in View Explorer. And in the past, the couple of sessions we've done prior to this, I've not brought up the View Explorer, because today in Stratum, for the most part, you can do everything you need to do in a view without going into the View Explorer. But I am going to open the View Explorer today. Some of you are probably already familiar with that, but the View Explorer is a way to maintain everything in the view. And I'm going to do that just so you can see how the properties get set for ranges and not ranges. And then You can also use those base calendars. So when we look at our calendars, so you can use base calendars or relative time. So typically when you're using time series, this is so you can see the current year, last year, things like that. So as time moves forward, as we talked about, it inevitably will, you will see your view will automatically roll over. You can also use absolute time here. So you can set up a view that just stretches across the page and has stuff for 2019 and 2020 or 2021, whatever it may be. So you can do that as well. So with that said, let's go look at a view that uses time series and talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to open this view. I'm going to hide this just so I get more space here. I'm going to do a couple of things here. You'll see that this view actually has a bunch of stuff in it. It has not only am I looking at the current year, January through February, but it has sales amount, sales unit. It does an average price, average daily units. By the way, average daily units is a cool calculation using a working days calendar to figure out how much we sell per day, how many units we move per day. And if you guys have interest in that, that's something that Paul and his group can help you out with. But it is something you can do in Stratum. I'm going to clean this view up a little bit, and I'm going to get rid of some of the stuff here just so it's very simple to look at. And to do that, I'm going to go into that View Explorer I was talking about. So those of you that are familiar with the View Explorer, this is old hat, but for those of you that are newer to Stratum, one of the things that I didn't show in the previous series was the View Explorer. And you can see here, I'm on Show Hide the View Explorer. I click this, and over here on the right, I'm going to get a window that lets me change all kinds of things about the view. Again, not a real need to come in here. I want to clean this view up so that I can show some things. So I'm going to get rid of a bunch of things here out of the view. And then I'm also going to I'm going to hide all these other measures that are showing up just so we have a really simple view to look at here. So again, this is the View Explorer. I can come in here and I can do those kinds of things. I'm going to apply my changes, and you'll see the view gets a little simplified. So now we're looking at just the current year, and we're only looking at sales for this. And you can see here, this is where we're seeing, right, up at the top, it only goes through September because, as you remember, I said in my demo, the current year we're in September. So I only have data, I've only had sales through September. If there were other years, other months out here, this would automatically include those. And let's kind of look at how that would work, because I'm looking at the current year here. You can see I'm filtered to look at just the current year. If you remember from our other sessions, there's a filter here, so I can go ahead and either click on that. I can click here, and this will take me straight to the filter for year. Or as you remember, this is in red now, the big funnel up at the top. That tells me there's a filter on something. I can go ahead and click on this, and I'll actually see that there's a filter on year, and this is year based. So if you remember when I talked about based versus absolute, the based is based on like current, last year, previous, or I could have been using absolute. In this case, I'm just using the current. You'll see here, I'm filtered to see just the current year. Let's add last year and 2 years ago to the mix. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. And what you'll see now is up here, I've gone from showing just the current year to I have 2 years ago. And if I scroll across the page, I'll see there's last year. So I can click here and I can drill back to year based. So now I've gone up, I'm looking just at years. And you'll remember if I drill on last year, for example, I'll see January through December. If I go back up and I drill on current year, I'm going to see just January through September because I only have data through September. So that's kind of interesting, and that's one of the ways we can do that. But let's talk about how I did that. So you'll see here, I've got your classic, just, on rows, I've got company, division, product line. I could drill down on one of these and it works just like normal. I'm going down and I saw the product lines here. But how did I get in the columns? How did I get stuff here? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open the View Explorer again, and you don't have to do it this way. You can go and use the plus sign just like we talked about. In fact, I'll just go ahead and do that. You can see here that if I scroll to the end, I have a bunch of dimensions that start with the word year. And really that's the key ones you need here. So whenever and the ones you're really interested in are these year based and these year days, year month, things like that. So anything that starts with year and then says based and then has another component to it, like year-based fiscal months, year-based days, all of these have two levels to them. They have the year and then the period of time you're focused on, months, days, whatever it may be. And they're based, so they're relative times. They're going to have things like this year, last year, and they're going to have yesterday, tomorrow, things like that, depending again on how you've configured that stuff. Down here where I have year month, you can see right here, so it's going to have year and months, but they're going to be absolute. That's just going to give me the year number, 2021, and it's going to give me the months, January through December. If I went down to year quarters, this would have 2019, 2020, 2021, and it would have Q1, Q2, Q3, et cetera. Year weeks are typically numbered, week 1, week 2, week 3, so you'd have that. So you're going to have that combination of things. Now, do note that there are things like weeks that are independent of year. You can see that right here. And if I scrolled up in this list and I went to under D for days, you'll see I have days that are, so these are time dimensions, time series that you can use, but they're independent of the year. So you have to be careful when you use these, because if you just looked at, say, January 1st without any year designation, it would just be the sum of any sale that happened in any year for January 1st. So you say, why are these even here, Frank? Because I might want to drill down another level when I'm looking, say, at months and see the individual days in the month. So I can add these to my drill down list and I can go ahead and see data below the month level. If I started with years and months, I can then drill down on a month and see the days. So let's just kind of talk about that. You can see here in the columns, I've got years. I've used the based, year-based, and year-based months. How did that get there? Let's kind of look at what I selected for that. And to do that, I'm going to open up the View Explorer again. And to open the View Explorer again, you just click on this folder with the magnifying glass. I'm going to open the View Explorer. And you'll see in my columns, I selected something called year-based months. And if I open that up, it has year-based months. I'm sorry, year-based and month-based. So that was my selection. Now, I could have, and again, another way to get here, I can edit, same set of data, just a different way to look at it. I'm going to scan for year, and you'll see down here, I mentioned year months. So I'm going to go ahead and include that in my list and show you what the difference is. So if I put years up here, so now I'm looking at year months, I'm going to say, okay, this view is going to change to show me all my years, and then I can drill down on the absolute year, and you'll see this goes out to September because 17 is my current year in the demo. So you can see that kind of stuff. So now I'm using year months. Let's switch back to using based stuff. So I just drag that up. I'm just dragging these around, and you can see I've now got the years. And remember, this is filtered. Again, it shows me that because there's a filter right there. And if I drill on one of these, it'll show me here. Let's say then I want to say, hey, well, I want to see all the days for January. How could I do that? Well, that's easy enough. Let's just go into my columns. And again, you can right click here and do an edit. You can use the plus sign over here. I'll use the plus sign. I'm just going to go and I'm going to select days. I'm going to say, okay. So what Stratum does is Stratum's smart enough to know that, hey, if you went and selected something, it's probably the next thing you want. And if you remember, we can see that currently the stuff in blue right here, the text is actually blue. Those are the levels I'm displaying. So I'm looking at the year and the months. And the next thing in line is right here. It's going to drill to days in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and drill to days on January, and amazingly enough, I'll get all the days that we sold something going across the top for January. So that's, that's something you might want to do. You might, maybe if I'd done this with quarters and then you wanted to go to months, you could do stuff like that. So you get that kind of thing here. And one of the other things we can do when we have time like this, we can actually put time on both axes. So it kind of a little trick you can do here. Let's go back up to year. So now I'm looking at years for the last 3 years, but I want to say, hey, for vegetables, how are my sales by day? I can drag the day. So all I did was grab that. I'm holding on to days with my, my left mouse button. I'm going to drop it on the vegetables here. And now I've got days going down the side, this year, last year. So this could be weeks, days, months, whatever you wanted, right? So I could have in this example gone up and gotten months or retrieved months as well, because months is an option. If I go to LM, here's months. I'm going to select months. It's going to add it in here. And now one of the things I can do is I can take the months and I can actually drag that. You can see months right here. I can go ahead and drag that onto vegetables, and that'll actually show me months down the side of the page. And you can see that for the last 3 years. So now I can begin to go ahead and take advantage of time in many different fashions. I'm going to go back to my product line. And then I'm going to drill on current year. So all I've done here, again, I'm using these dimensions. Now, the big question here, and I kind of skipped over this, is how do you get this stuff to even show? Because normally you don't even see these dimensions that have time in them. To do that, you have to open the View Explorer. Like I said, you're up here. And you have to go to Measure Items. And on the Measure Items, you can do some interesting things here. So I can double click on Measure Items, or you right click to see the properties. And I'm going to go and see the properties for this. And on the properties, I can turn time ranges off and on. And you'll see here it says time range no. So by saying no, that implies you want to use a time series, and you can in fact then once you turn that off, the time dimensions that we were looking at, year-based, months-based, year and months, all those will start to show up in your dimension selections. Another interesting thing I can do here is I can move the where the measures show up. So right now I have dollars or sales amount on the columns. I mentioned this earlier. You can actually switch stuff to rows. So I'm going to switch stuff to rows. Not that interesting. This becomes more interesting when I go through and I pick some other measures. If I pick sales units and I show the units, I'll pick the average selling price. I'm going to show those. And now they're kind of down the page. So I see them down the page instead of across. So what's the difference there? If I moved them to columns, it would look like this. But again, using the time series. So I can have data going across the page, down the page, whichever way you want to do it in Stratum. So that's a little bit about how to use time series. Now, the question becomes time ranges and time series, and how do you want to take advantage? When should you take advantage of them? So the simplest example to me is, number one, if you want to look at something like sales and budget or something like that by month with, going across the page, time series is the answer. I can go in here, I can say, hey, I want to add a regular measure. I can go and get my budget or plan or whatever you guys call it, your forecast, whatever it may be. I can go ahead and get that, and I can say, here's my budget amount. I'm going to add that to this view. I'm going to turn off some of these other things just while I'm here, just to make this less confusing, but I'm going to turn that stuff off. And then I'm going to say, okay, and now I'm looking at sales versus budget. And then I can easily do a calculation between sales and budget, and that'll be repeated column over column. So that's really the key time you want to use this. You can also take advantage of time series when you want to look at data at a higher level and drill into it, as I mentioned. So look at it at the year level. This will show me my sales and budget for all the years, and then it allows me to drill down. So I can do that as well. The other thing is when you're using time ranges, now I can very easily look at a year-to-date number, a rolling date. When I want to look at data accumulated over time, it's really easy to do that with time ranges. And this is probably the most popular, this is the most popular view of the world that we have. So time ranges, great for looking at accumulated time. You also, if you want to look at data accumulated over different periods of time, this comes up particularly for our CPG customers, where I had a promo that ran from week 7 to week 12 last year. And then this year, that's a different set of weeks. It's actually week 8 to week 13 this year. Easy for me to say, look at that range of time last year versus that range of time this year, and let's compare what's going on. Or if I want to look at the sum of what happened in the last 2 months versus the sum of what's happened 3 and 4 months ago, to look at that, I can easily set that up. So time ranges are great for that. And again, time ranges are the default. And then you can also, time ranges allow you to very easily go in and change the time range. So if you want to adjust this, if you remember, we were looking at rolling 12 on these first two columns. And now I'm going to say I want to do rolling, I don't know, rolling 6 instead. Again, I'm going to use 5 here because it's 5 plus the current month. And now I say, okay, and I'm looking at rolling 5. It's just so simple to do. So there you go. That's a overview of time in Stratum. Please, if you have any questions, I'm able to hang out, let me know via chat, and I'll go ahead and answer questions for you. In terms of getting a hold of us, here's the contact information for us. Don't hesitate to contact me or the folks over in support at customersupport.silvon.com. Those guys know a ton, know more than me. And then we've got some good YouTubes out there, or you can go to silvon.com. Also, there's a bunch of stuff about time and using time, and there's also some posts in the forum about time. But any of these ways to get a hold of us will work.